back here on CCN Spotlight. CSM Donald McAlister told us of his story, his interest into the military, and the injuries he sustained in battle. And we want to start with those injuries. So you are now in the hospital, sustained major injuries, and tell us a little bit about that and then what it took for you to start rolling back.
Well, the injuries I had were severe. I was actually told that I wouldn't be able to jump out of airplanes again. I'd probably never do a push-up again because my clavicle and everything was messed up. Because of the shrapnel in my eye, I wouldn't be able to jump out of planes because of everything going on in my hip and my lower leg with shrapnel everywhere. And in the hospital, you know, I told myself, for one, I had 3 little girls at the time, and 2, the war had just started, and I was like, I'm not going to quit. I'm not going to let it beat me. And I was able to push through my injuries. What I will tell you is back then in 2003, it was a lot different than it is now for soldiers being wounded. The standard of care was good, but there was no structure. You know?
No structure. Tell us, you're talking about
Yeah.
in the VA hospital.
It wasn't, at this time I wasn't in the VA. I was in Walter Reed in the actual active duty military hospital, but the problems they had back then, and you know, they worked through to fix those problems, was, you know, if you were injured and sustained injuries, you had, like, depending on your injuries, like me, I had 4 or 5 different doctors, but I didn't have one central person in charge
coordinating
of
your treatment.
Exactly. And as the time went on and the war, you know, grew, more injuries grew, and they actually put a lot of programs in place to take care of soldiers. And well, anyway, with the injuries, I told myself that I wasn't going to let it beat me. And you know, the one thing I've always told guys, even back then, about me, and I think it's important for anybody to know, is, one, if you're physically in shape and you take care of yourself, if you're injured or hurt, your resilience is going to be that much stronger. You're going to have a good chance of actually coming back from those injuries and, you know, regaining a normal life. Now, I was fortunate enough to not lose a limb or anything, which I've had plenty of men that I know, including 7 that work for me, that are amputees. And, you know, but even as I got through those injuries and pushed on and kept deploying and deploying and deploying.
Wait a second. You went through these extensive injuries. You're not expected to recover. And then because of both self-discipline, self-confidence, and a lot of hard work and belief in yourself, you were able to come back and then wanted to return back not only to active duty, but also to service in a combat role.
Yes, sir.
That's pretty incredible. So you then get back up. About how long did that take you to do that?
It was all total almost a year.
For you to, all total, that's not very much time when you consider the injuries that you had. And then you also talk about the transition, the difference in the care that you were getting, the lack of coordination. And so you saw what other people were going through, and
yes,
by
sir.
comparison, being the hero you are, you look at other folks and see that they may have lost a limb and that somehow that was worse. I think that just any type of injury is very difficult, but it's incredible that you made that transition. So now where did you go after that?
Well, after that, I was able to, I spent a few months in Walter Reed, and I was able to actually get them to release me back to Fort Bragg. And I went down to Fort Bragg, and then I continued most of my care through UNC Chapel Hill, but I was able to get home to my family where we were at. And I'll never forget, it was, so I was wounded, and it was about 11 months after I was wounded, I got to do my first jump. And they didn't really want me to do it, but I had to do it just to see if I still had it in me, and I did it, and it made me feel so good. And then real quick, so in December of '04, I had, because I was on the severely injured list back then, I had actually got a free trip to Disney World for me and my family, and we were all set. The Army said we could go. Toby Keith and all these other people were going to be there. Well, anyway, it was Thanksgiving weekend. We got the call that we were going back to Iraq for the elections, and I had to go home that night and told my wife that I was like, we're not going to Disney World.
You couldn't go to Disney World.
And I was told I could stay home and do it and, you know, continue to heal. But as a platoon sergeant, I had to go back. And
You had to go back because of your own conviction and commitment to your own men and
Yes,
to
sir.
the country. That's what a hero does, and that's not a term you probably have ever used for yourself. But allow me, as a veteran, to say that and to say what incredible courage it takes to do that. Along the way, you're involved now, after 24 years, in the Independence Fund, and tell us a little bit about that part as well.
Well, the Independence Fund, until a few years ago, I didn't know who they were. I had a soldier, Mike Bernardo. He was, when we were deployed in 2009-10 in the Arghandab River Valley in Afghanistan, which was one of the worst places on earth. He lost it. He was wounded. We evac'd him, and he sustained some injuries from an IED, but it wasn't serious. 2 weeks later, he showed back up from Kandahar. They told him, he didn't have to go back out because he had a TBI, but he came back. And then a day later, he hit a dismounted IED and lost his leg, almost completely lost his left arm, and he wound up being in a coma for 2 months, and he's one of the most severely injured veterans that have been in the war, as far as all his injuries and all. He's had close to 130 surgeries.
Oh.
But with him, the Independence Fund actually helped him a few years back with a track chair. And that's kind of how I learned how they were.
Because of your relationship with him,
Yes, sir.
and then his extensive injuries,
Yes, sir.
leading to the care. And that's not a government agency,
No,
is it?
nonprofit.
It's a separate agency.
Yes, sir.
So your understanding about how the Independence Fund had interacted with him, and that brought you some awareness about it.
Yes,
and we're
sir.
going to talk more about that in just a few minutes here. So coming up, you may be surprised to hear some of the big names that support the Independence Fund. We'll share with you that list, and we'll talk a little bit more about the fund, about what they do.